So in step 3, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the actual solutions are for this. I've talked about the problem, I've talked about how to fix it yourself, cheap. Now the other end of that is you could get an electrical tester, sort out which wire is the problem, pull that wire out of the harness yourself. That one wire will fit easily through that hole in the firewall. Pull that wire out of the other end, solder a new wire in place, and you are good to go. And it'll pretty much be like brand new, except that the harness has loosened a little bit, or it wouldn't have let that wire loose in the first place, which means it's not going to fit tight, which means you need a new collar. The problem is, what you need to do is remove all the wires from that collar and resolder the whole thing. Now, most mechanics are not soldering experts. You take a mechanics class, you don't even pick up a soldering iron. I was a A+ core hardware certified computer technician. I also have multiple degrees in physics and engineering and math, from photonics to aerodynamics. And I studied a lot of things. And what I will tell you is that the design of these things is what's actually at fault. See, they could put a better quality wiring harness in designed to last for the life of the vehicle. They don't do that. Now, most automotive designers, car designers, are not designing a new wiring harness. They don't even think about it. It's an afterthought. As long as the car does what they intended it to do when it's new, they're happy. But it wouldn't take much to design a wiring harness that separates into 3 sections. Little puzzle piece design so it slides together, and you could slide those sections apart and put the whole thing through that hole in the firewall, making it a lot easier for the mechanics to do their job. Part of what I wanted to talk about here is the mechanics themselves. Guys, you're mechanics. You have an obligation to not rip off your customer and to tell them the truth. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be a mechanic, man. Maybe you should go work for the Hells Angels and sell cocaine. Because if you're going to be that dishonest and rob people like that, well, that's just not fair. Because at no point did anybody tell these folks the truth. At no point did anybody tell the previous owner the truth. So then I get into the rest of the wiper system, and I find that the wipers that they need for the wiper arms that they have are hard to find now. The truck's a 95, it's not that old. But they have a pin that sticks out from the wiper arm and a button on top, a lock mechanism on top that locks them in place. That used to be a very common setup. There's 3 basic types. Push pin, where there's a pin, pardon me, that locks it into the wiper arm. And then on top of that, there's a mechanism that locks that pin in place. Now, there are 3 basic types. One is with a pin and a locking arm to hold that arm and to hold the windshield wiper arm on. Then there's a clip-in style, where it basically just has little clips that slide into the wiper arm itself. And there's a third type. Irrelevant, really. What matters is that this particular design on this truck, which is a 95 GMC, uses 95, uses a combination of those 2 methods. It doesn't have the locking arm, it has a pin, and then on top of that it has the button on top. Now those ones are actually fairly rare these days, but back then used to be very common. Now, the fact that they continually change these designs when they were working fine in the first place is about patent law. See, you can't call yourself an innovative company these days unless you can file patents to prove that you're innovative. And if you have something that works made by another company, Ford had this problem with their gearing in the 60s. They patented the perfect gearing. It's well known that Ford gearing is the best. Well, that's why. Because nobody else is allowed to use their particular gear ratio. They won't let anybody. How dare they? They put out what they know is the best. They went way out of their way to patent every possible gearing combination. For what? So they could keep it to themselves like greedy bastards. So that you can't have it without going to them. Well, what does that mean for any other vehicle you buy? It won't have the right gearing. The same is true of a lot of other things in the automotive industry and in tech industry altogether. Anyway, so in future videos, I'm going to start talking a little bit as I go through this vehicle about what the problems are, like these wipers. The arms themselves are actually a problem, and a variety of other things that go along with it. How the wiring harnesses are run through. I'm going to show you guys that. I'm going to show you guys a whole bunch of stuff on this vehicle as I go through it and sort out where the bad engineering is and where the good engineering is. No, I'm just going to focus on the parts that are a problem. And I'm going to do this so that individual owners can look at this video series and figure for themselves what the problem is and whether or not they actually want a mechanic. Because a lot of times you might think you do, but you just don't. Keith out.